I was on the radio for minute and a half at most. It had absolutely nothing to do with what I do creatively or my YouTube channel or my political stuff. I had just been approached through my current job by an interviewer called Anapin, and she was interested in talking about young people's employment and getting opinions from young people. I will start off by talking about how this interview even happened, then about the topic that I discussed, and the topic that's sort of more pertinent to the article itself. I will actually be trying to put in the timestamps so you can skip ahead if you're not interested in a particular part of the video. You know, it's a very relevant topic, both in Latvia and globally, the struggles that people face finding a job, and of course the struggles the world, different countries in it, different governments face when fighting things like unemployment and demographic crises. The whole article is like 5 minutes long. It only had like a 5-minute time slot on the radio, so a lot of what I said was actually cut out, and that's completely fine. I was not the only person being interviewed by far, so yeah, we'll get to that. So for how the interview actually happened, I arrived in the center of Riga, in Doma Laukums. The radio building is right there, Latvijas Radio, and I met up with the interviewer, the reporter, Anapin, and right now actually the radio building is going through renovations, so it was a bit of a mess. When I arrived, we kind of struggled to find a good place to record, which is why I think you can kind of hear a little bit of an audio quality issue. It's not the best quality compared to some of the other audio there, but like, it's fine. Yeah, it doesn't really matter that much. She had some questions prepared about the topic, and she also let me speak in my own mind about things, and some of that was included, some of my answers included, some of the stumbling that I did over my own words was cut out, so thank you, Anna. So the recording happened on Monday. Today is Thursday. The article went up, and the radio was programmed. The article was broadcast on the radio also Wednesday morning, so that's where we are now. I guess there wasn't that much to say about the recording process, was there? But I also think like a rat had died somewhere in the office building, so that's also part of why it was a mess. Now I think I'll just start by going through my own thought process, my own experiences with looking for a job in Latvia, because, oh boy, I mean, I worked quite a few different jobs. I worked as a teenager, as a kitchen aide. I've worked as a shop assistant as a teenager. Then I spent several summers working as a sort of campground keeper assistant person who was also the only person at the campground working most of the time for like a couple of months, raking leaves, taking in camper money, and then washing boats, essentially. Then I went on to work in a store to get myself through my first bout of going through university. Dropped out of university, realizing couldn't mix up university with that, physical work without going insane, so I went on to become a janitor at a school. Then I later graduated with a history's bachelor and then became an English teacher at that school after I also got a certificate to become an educator. And then I spent a year working that, year and a half. After that, I decided, not really cut out for this, and there's a separate video I want to do about the issues I see in the education system, both as, having been a student and as a teacher, but that's for another time. The important part is that starting from the beginning of this year, I was unemployed. I was receiving unemployment benefits for a while. Well, technically I still am. This is my last month of it, because halfway through that, while I was trying to do as much as I can on YouTube, this is when I started to do the gaming content as well. It didn't really take off, and I decided that this is not worth the time investment. In case you were one of the people following along, one of the very few people following along that gaming channel, that's the reason why I stopped. It was just not worth the investment. It wasn't getting the growth I was hoping for. In fact, across the board, I've seen YouTube views just go down, and that's not entirely encouraging, which is also why my schedule's been a little weird, because my main focus became trying to advance my career elsewhere so I could, live. But as I was saying, for about half a year, I was purely on those benefits, but then I was offered through the government system, through the government employment agency, the NVA, not to be confused with the NWA, which was to work for this youth organization called Young Folks, which is, they help kids like host clubs and go on excursions, and they do a lot of EU-related stuff. They work a lot with Erasmus projects. They have done quite a lot of work in terms of Russian integration, native Russian integration for Latvia, as well as helping Ukrainian refugees and their integration, and they've done a really good job. But they had they had very little going on in terms of a Latvian branch, which is what I was sort of hired to help out with, to develop, and we're still sort of working on that, but again, someone else is going to have to take over after me. It's been a whole sequence of people, and we're still trying to make it happen. And this is a really great opportunity that I was given, to do this work, but the problem is that this is 6 months of experience. Great, I needed that, I can put that on my CV, but of course when I go to any application site to look for a job in social media, for example, in advertising and whatever is related to this branch of work, obviously the requirements are always hey, you need at least 2 years, you need at least 3 years of experience, and that sort of leads into the first big issue, which is a universal issue that I think every country faces, that every population faces, young, old, doesn't matter. The fact that you are expected to have tons of experience for entry-level positions, which in turn leads to those entry-level positions being only accessible to people who are not entry-level. There's very, very little you can do to get that entry-level experience. And so you're just kind of shit out of luck. Even with this government's project, this opportunity that I was given with Young Folks, I do not have that adequate level of experience for my CV, apparently. But that's sort of only the beginning of the problems, because the next big issue is another sort of broad cultural issue that I think is an issue across the board in pretty much everywhere you go, in every country, which is what I defined in my interview as silence. You send in your CV, and I saw that another point brought up by other people. One of the girls that was interviewed, she said oh, you send in your CV, there's a month-long waiting period to see if there's any kind of response. If you get a response, that's maybe a month after you get a response, and you go into an interview, and then you wait after the interview, and so on. And it's a whole huge waiting process during which you have no idea if you're going to be getting this job. You're going to be bouncing around and trying to find other jobs maybe at the same time. You might miss something, and it's kind of just a hassle. But that's sort of almost the best possible outcome, because the most frequent outcome is probably going to be that you send in your CV and you receive back nothing. And that is sort of standard practice. If you look at the descriptions of these posts, these employment options, they will usually say, oh, we will only contact those people who reach the next step of the evaluation, those people we want to interview, and so on. Which in theory is understandable, fine, you want to lower the workload of your HR department, but when you are just starting out your career, when you're just looking for your first jobs in the sector, in the sphere that you want to work in after you've had your education, that is a problem, because that silence gives you nothing. You have no idea why your application could have been rejected. Well, you can only hazard a guess. Maybe you didn't have the experience, maybe there was something wrong in your CV, maybe they didn't like something in your CV, maybe they wanted a motivational letter, maybe you just didn't have necessary skills, maybe they just saw a photo of you, maybe they Googled you, maybe they just never opened your CV in the first place. You have absolutely no idea what caused the rejection, because there was no rejection, there was just an ignoring of you. And the government isn't doing that much to help when it comes to getting employed here. This is where I say that if you want my completely neutral takes on politics and everything, and our government, I try to maintain a level of neutrality on my Politics Far From Home series. If you see a video of me just sitting in front of my mic yapping, that's not gonna be an unbiased opinion. There's gonna be my biases. In fact, if you see any dumbass on the internet sitting in front of their microphone just talking away, you need to be aware of their biases, and you need to be aware that this is just an opinion you're hearing. Unless you're watching Vsauce and he's just throwing fact after fact after fact at you. I shouldn't do that because my camera freaks the hell out. Look, I'm a fire wizard. Summoning a phoenix. The government really doesn't do enough to help young people find employment. In fact, their resources are like pretty abysmal. Like me, I imagine most young people that have finished college, they are going into the job market and writing up their CVs. They're doing like CV writing for the first time since they were in high school. In high school, they probably had to write them out on a piece of paper and write about all their schools, including their primary schools, and talk about like their hobbies because they didn't have much of a job experience. So, like me, they'll probably go on the internet and look up CV templates, or, you know, I wrote it in Latvian first, I wrote CVs, and the template that I was given was terrible. It's like the very basic Word document, very plain, nothing on it, doesn't look official, doesn't look like anything at all. Don't really get enough information about, what should I include, what shouldn't I include. No information about how you're supposed to describe your skills exactly, how you're supposed to describe your language ability. Yeah, there's no standard that you can find anywhere about that, unless you start cracking open old Latvian textbooks, and even then, it's like, how relevant are those old Latvian textbooks going to be for what you need to do now? So your best bet is to actually just look at a CV template from something like Canva and rewrite it and re-edit it, and even then, it's like, well, what's to say that the government, that the job you're applying for is going to care for that? There is an option, there's the attempt to standardize this in European level with this thing called Europass, which I also talked about with on Upin, just, got cut out because there wasn't enough time to do that.
Hey, what's up? Hello, Future Walter here. Europass is actually pretty decent as it turns out, so I'm just gonna cut out like 2 minutes of me yapping. If you want to use Europass though, make sure that you set it to your own country's language, unless you are aiming specifically to work abroad, because apparently, even though in the English version you cannot find like social media management or social media expert or whatever else as a job title, or the specific kind of teacher that I was, it was actually fully available in Latvian. Apparently, Latvia recognizes social media management as a profession, even though Europe as like a broader whole might not. Strange.
And so a lot of teenagers, a lot of university students, and a lot of people my age end up working jobs that are not that great. I am probably, like, so far my CV hasn't, reached any eyes that appreciated it, apparently, but, like, I can return to that school that I was working at, but I wouldn't return as a teacher, even though I probably could, I just don't want to. I would return as a janitor, and I would probably be pretty happy with that option, because I know it's far from the worst one. Customer service is a horrible industry in Latvia and everywhere else, but the most probably, like, the worst option that is, like, way too enticing for young folks, not the organization I work at, but, like, in general, is online casinos. And when I was in university for the first time, I was in RTU, Riga Technical University. I had course mates, who did work at one of these online casinos, and they would come into school tired, needing like needing like an energy drink or 3 coffees, and they would tell horror stories about how girls would work through the night, pass out, throw up, and then be told they still need to go back and serve another customer online. But the pay they get is like good compared to what is available, and it doesn't require that much education, doesn't require that much skill. It's an entry-level position with very little growth, mind you. Here I want to talk about like what the article is mostly about, actually, because what we were interviewed as young people was about our attempts at getting a job. And this was all done, and I actually didn't really know what the article was about. She just, on Uppy, and she just contacted me to talk about this, and it's like, yeah, I get what's going on. Maybe because, she didn't want us to be led a certain direction when we were being interviewed, but it was all done sort of in contrast to the topic of the article itself. And the topic of the article is
the businessmen are talking about how the sort of hits in the demographics of the country and the employments need to be fixed with either technologies or guest work. And that is, of course, very interesting when it's in contrast and opened with the interview with me about how it's actually, like, you will, as a young person, you'll be trying, actively looking for a job, doing everything you can, like, possibly do to find a job. In my case, I just also work in every possible direction. I try to do YouTube to advance my social media career. I'm doing stand-up now as well. I'm doing a recording and editing job for a freelance thing in like a week's time, because I just need to do everything I possibly can. I might start doing like tutoring as well, which I didn't want to do, but I might have to. Even through all those attempts, from the perspective of business owners, from the perspective of employers, there is a lack of working people in Latvia, or people who are willing to work. That is the perception, which is horrifying. There's sort of like 3 or 4 different groups that are all technically working towards having higher employment, lowering unemployment, and growing the economy and helping the country grow. That's technically the goal of every party involved here ultimately. The young people seeking employment, the employers, the government, all of them are technically working towards that, but every party will tell you a different solution and point out that the solutions from other parties are actually like causing greater problems. Here's the president of the Latvian Employer Confederation, Andris Bite, for example, and he's talking about the need to bring in these laborers from different countries because there's not enough people willing to do this certain work in Latvia. And he's sort of asking the government to have a unified communication system with them, with the employers and with countries involved and people involved, to know what countries, how many people, what spheres of work can be done. And I don't really like Andris Bite, like, at all. There's a lot wrong, I think, with this this union, this employers confederation in Latvia. They often come up with some heinous statements, but I mean, I understand at least wanting to have some unified government opinion on this. Then you have the business owner for Twino, which is like this digital credit card company, and Armands Broks, and he's talking about how he is actually sort of cutting back on needs for employees with the use of AI, and how if you're not using AI, you're actually overpaying your employees, which, of course, silently what he's really saying, very subtly, is with AI, you can pay your employees the same amount even though they do way more work and generate way more revenue. And then actually, at the end of the article, they're talking to Bita, and actually here he makes a pretty good point, which is that there is this sort of sentiment in the government, in party rhetoric quite often, talking about how, we can't keep bringing in these low-value workers, we can't keep bringing in these immigrants from other countries to do cheap labor, and so on, because they're taking jobs away from local, people, local youths. But of course, the reality is that a lot of these local youths, myself included, would rather not do a lot of this cheap labor. That's sort of just the natural things, but someone has to do it. And there's hundreds of clips of politicians, celebrities, whoever, doing horrible faux pas, essentially saying, well, who's gonna clean our toilets then? That's not what I'm saying here. The reality is someone is going to do it, someone will have to do it, it's just that occasionally a toilet will be left unclean because the number of people within the country, within the community that are willing to do these jobs isn't infinite. I left that work as a janitor and 2 years ago, and 2 years later, they're like, hey, we still need a janitor, because they do. Because they got him too. And the point that Bita brings up that I actually agree with is that it would be a very strange and almost amoral, as he says it, which, by the way, interesting thing about the Latvian language, amoral in Latvian actually means immoral, I think. At least he's using it that way. I haven't looked into that, but that would make sense. I haven't heard anyone say immoral, amoral. He says amoral. but it means immoral. Amoral means lack of morality. Immoral means negative morality. But all of it is a spook anyway. But he says it would be amoral to have a society where cheap labor is done by the locals, and then you bring... There's a lot of parties that talk about immigration and limiting immigration. They will say, we will only bring in highly skilled laborers, we will only bring experienced and educated people to do high-level work. Except the reality of that is, you're saying that you will prefer to have immigrants doing high-level work. You will prefer to do that with those, guest workers, essentially. And the problem with that isn't like, oh, they're gonna come here to take our gerbs and gonna destroy our country and values. I don't care that much. But in the short term, that leaves young people who are looking for these entry-level jobs incapable of doing so, because now they have even more competition from foreign nationals who are also looking for this kind of work and who actually have those years of experience. And so they get preference. And in the long term, that means all those young people in the country never get that entry-level experience. They never get that amount of experience that they need to actually move forward and actually do something with that. And they're sort of either forced to seek jobs with lower qualifications and lower chances of growth, or outright leave the country. Effectively, this attempt at solving the employment crisis by bringing in highly skilled workers has this potential to be way more devastating than anything else, because, well, the country's own systems, the country's own development will sort of fall behind when it comes to education, when it comes to creating new professionals. That's sort of my take on it. That's going to do it for today's video. I would like you to leave a comment and a like and a subscribe. Tell me what you think about the situation. Have you had any of these experiences? Maybe if you're not from Latvia, what is it like in your country? Are the issues similar? Are they different? What's your take on it? Remember, like I said, I'm obviously somewhat biased. I have my own opinions on these things. Just remember to be respectful. Don't go at each other's throats for holding a different opinion. I'm not saying like every opinion is equal in that regard, but I am saying like it's a YouTube comment section, just like be chill. Well, see you in the next one. Sometimes a party will form to fill in a vacant niche in politics, such as the Progressives, moving in seeing no clear-cut left-wing progressive party in Latvian politics. Other times a party will form further on the wings of existing political movements, as the recently formed ultranationalists in Rising Sun form off the backs of members removed from National Union for being too right-wing, which, by the way, is putting it very lightly.